Okay, today is Monday, September 1st, 2014. Okay, we'll start with the homage to the Buddha 3 times. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so far, believe it or not, we've gotten through 2 chapters of the Abhidhamma Sangha, and now we are going to start on chapter 5. Now, chapter 4, as you know, is concerned with the cognitive process. And as I mentioned on, I think, the first day, or maybe it was yesterday, that states of consciousness fall into 2 categories. That there is process consciousness, that is, the states of consciousness that occur within the cognitive process. And then there is what is called process-freed consciousness. These are the states of consciousness that occur outside the cognitive process. And basically the states of consciousness that occur outside the cognitive process are the rebirth linking, the bhavanga, and the death consciousness. And so in this chapter, chapter 5, the focus is going to be on those types of consciousness. Okay, so let us go to the beginning of the chapter, which is on page 185. And so the introductory verse says that so far the compendium of the occurrence of consciousness has been explained by way of the cognitive process during the course of existence. Now the compendium of the occurrence of consciousness at rebirth will be told. And though the verse uses the expression, if you look in the Pali, he uses the word sandhyang, which is just short for patisandhyang, but he actually means, by mentioning the patisandhi consciousness, that he's also going to discuss the roles of the bhavanga and the death consciousness. And in order to understand the occurrence of this passive flow of consciousness from rebirth through the bhavanga to death, there are a number of categories that he mentions as fundamental to this chapter. Okay, so the first of these, we see these enumerated in section 2. We have the 4 planes of existence, 4 modes of rebirth linking, 4 kinds of karma, which, as we'll see, actually turns out to be 4 sets of 4 kinds of karma, so actually 16 kinds of karma. And then the 4-fold advent or occurrence of death. Okay, we could, for now, just turn past the table with the 31 planes of existence to the guide to section 2, which has some important discussion of the relationship between mind and cosmos, mind and the universe in early Buddhist thought. Yesterday, during the question period, somebody brought up the idea, isn't everything just created by mind, or doesn't everything just consist of mind, so that mind is all that exists? But from the standpoint of early Buddhism, that's not quite the case. We say that mind plays a very instrumental role, but the mind and the universe, mind and the cosmos, linked together, or they're locked together in a kind of mutually conditioning relationship, so that the cosmos can't be simply reduced to mind, as philosophical idealism will hold. And on the other hand, mind is not seen as just a byproduct of purely physical cosmic processes, the way modern materialism will hold. Reductionist materialism says that through the course of evolution, living beings emerge, then within the living beings, nervous systems emerge, and then somehow, it seems almost by alchemy, mind arises, superimposed upon the functional material nervous system of living beings. But the Buddha's view is explained in this particular section. And so we say that the author undertakes the survey. He's going to undertake a survey of the whole range of the phenomenal world, all of the planes of existence. We say the author undertakes the survey before examining the types of process-freed consciousness, because the external universe, according to the Abhidhamma, is an outer reflection of the internal cosmos of mind. The external universe registers in concrete, manifest form the subtle gradations in states of consciousness. And in support of this, from the suttas, there is a sutta actually it's two suttas that are found in the Samyutta Nikaya. I think this is chapter 22 in the Samyutta Nikaya, the discourses on the five aggregates, in which the Buddha asked the monks. There seemed to have been a famous painting that was well known to the people in that area. It was called the Charana, was the name of that painting. And apparently it depicted all different beings in the human realm, and all of the different, all different types of people, all different types of animals. And then the Buddha asked the monks, he said, do you know that painting called Charana? And the monks say, yes, apparently they were familiar with it. Then the Buddha said, the mind, I say, is even more diverse than that painting called the Charana. And why is that? Because everything, all forms that are seen in the world, manifest the diversity in the mind. And then in another sutta, I think it comes right after that one, the Buddha says that in the animal realm, there is so much diversity amongst all the different types of animals, from reptiles to birds to amphibians to mammals, so much diversity. And yet the Buddha says that all of that diversity in the animal realm is a manifestation of the diversity of mind, because it's the mind that creates the karma that comes to expression in all of these different beings in the animal realm. And so even beyond the animal realm, there are all of these other realms of existence, and they all are, in a sense, external manifestations of the diversity in the minds of beings, because it's through our karma the mental process of volition that we create this diversity in the different realms of existence. Okay, but this, continuing to read, this does not mean that the Abhidhamma reduces the outer world to a dimension of mind in the manner of philosophical idealism. If anybody has studied philosophy, some of the idealists say that the external world is just mind. It's just subjective impressions. But Buddhism doesn't hold that the outer world doesn't have any kind of concrete actuality, that it's all just a manifestation of the mind itself. Okay, so we say that the outer world is quite real and possesses, we call it objective existence, or maybe concrete actual existence. However, the outer world is always a world that's apprehended by consciousness, by the mind, and the type of consciousness determines the nature of the world that appears. Thus, consciousness and the world are mutually dependent and inextricably connected to such an extent that the hierarchical structure, that is the variety of planes of existence going from the lowest through the intermediate to the highest planes, so the hierarchical structure of the realms of existence exactly reproduces and corresponds to the hierarchical structure of consciousness. So we have different grades of consciousness: unwholesome, sense sphere wholesome, fine material sphere wholesome, immaterial sphere wholesome. So these different gradations of consciousness come to expression in the worlds or the realms of existence that are experienced by the beings within those realms. So beings come to exist in those realms and to come to experience a corresponding world because of the gradations in the karma that they created that bring about existence in these realms. Okay, so then we say that because of this correspondence, each of the two, the objective hierarchy of existence and the inner gradation of consciousness, provides the key to understanding the other. So the reason why living beings are reborn into a particular realm is because they have generated in a previous life the karma, and the karma is a volitional force of consciousness that leads to rebirth into that realm. And so we can say that in the final analysis, all the realms of existence are formed, fashioned, and sustained by the mental activity of living beings. But at the same time, this is where the relationship is mutual, these realms provide the objective stage for consciousness to continue its evolution in a new personality and under new conditions. Now, each realm is keyed to a particular type of rebirth consciousness, that is the patisandhi or reconnection consciousness, which then becomes the bhavanga or life continuum flowing on through the course of existence until the end of the life process at death. Thus, in dependence upon karma ripening in the sense sphere, a sense sphere rebirth consciousness arises and sense sphere existence becomes manifest. If one creates strong karma of the fine material type through the jhanas, then one will take rebirth in the fine material sphere with a fine material sphere rebirth consciousness, and then one dwells in the fine material realm of existence. And in dependence on karma ripening in the immaterial sphere, that is, if one achieves and masters one of the 4 immaterial meditative attainments, then this will generate a rebirth consciousness in the immaterial plane, and then one will live out one's existence in the immaterial plane. And then we have a quotation from a sutta here, where the Buddha says that karma is the field, consciousness is the seed, and craving is the moisture for the consciousness of beings obstructed by ignorance and fettered by craving to be established, that is, to take rebirth in a new realm of existence, either low, middling, or superior. Okay, now sometimes, when as Buddhists we speak about the different planes of existence, the hell realms, of course the animal realm we can see, the celestial realms, the fine material realm, immaterial realm. There are a lot of people with modern education, particularly scientific education, who start expressing skepticism about this, and ask for, scientific proof. How can we prove that there are these other realms of existence? And to illustrate this, I came almost by accident upon what I think is a very good illustration of this. Back in the days when I was living in Kandy, in Sri Lanka, in the forest hermitage, to get any information about the world there, I had a radio with shortwave radio bands. So the radio had 4 bands: the AM band, FM band, shortwave 1, shortwave 2. And I used to get my world news from the BBC World Service, and I think it would come on the shortwave 1 band. And so I always kept my radio tuned to the shortwave 1 band. But one day I turned on the radio, I wanted to get the news, and then I went through, I had the, we call this the dial, on the place where I usually get the BBC. I wasn't getting it. Then I started moving the dial all across the band, trying to get the BBC World Service. I couldn't pick it up. I was just getting a lot of Sri Lankan radio stations. So Lanka Pravritti. So, or getting other radio stations, sometimes the English service, sometimes in Sinhala, sometimes Tamil. But going back and forth, couldn't get the BBC World Service, and I was wondering what's going on. Then I realized that through carelessness, I must have knocked the band tuner down from the shortwave 1 to the FM band. And so from one end of the FM band to the other, you could go from one end to the other, can't get the BBC World Service. Now, if I were a modern, scientifically educated, skeptically inclined student, I would say, therefore, BBC World Service doesn't exist. It's just a figment of your imagination. You've come here from the West, bringing your Western cultural baggage. But now you have to get rid of that Western cultural baggage. You can't, you've checked all of the radio stations, and even you've gone to the far end of the radio band, you never got the BBC World Service. So it's all just sort of a maybe traditional myth that's developed amongst Western people, that there's something like a BBC World Service. But, Get real, man. We're following the criterion of rigorous science here, and there's just no BBC World Service on this radio. Okay, but now when I realized my mistake, then I switched back to the shortwave radio band and tuned the dial back and forth, and there comes the BBC World Service. Today we have some news for you from the United States President Bill Clinton. Okay, so this is the way I think we can understand the different realms of existence. We shouldn't understand them as being the way they're understood in the popular imagination, that the hells are somehow somewhere way deep down in the earth. If you dig down, keep on getting a super, what do they call these machines that dig up the earth? Bulldozer? No, the bulldozer rolls over. Excavation device. Keep on digging up the earth, that eventually you're going to find the hells down there. Or if you shoot a rocket, we've already done this, we've shot rockets up into space, and we haven't gotten any messages from the two-seater heaven. But if we see them as, I say that they're operating at different vibrational frequencies. And so if we could tune our mind to these different vibrational frequencies, then we could experience the world from the standpoint of these different realms of existence. And there are two ways to change the vibrational frequency of our consciousness to experience those realms. One I don't particularly recommend if you want to see whether the hell realms exist or not. And that is to commit the deeds that lead to rebirth into those realms. Of course, if you want to confirm the existence of the heavenly realms, then you can do this. You could do very good, wholesome, worthy deeds. But to confirm the existence of the lower realms, don't go around committing the deeds that lead to rebirth there. So that's one way, is by cultivating the karma that leads to the different realms. The other way is through the development of the jhanas up to the level of the fourth or fifth jhana of the Abhidhamma system. On that basis, then one can develop what is called the divine eye, the Diba Chakku, through which one could see other realms of existence. Yeah, another analogy that's occurred to me, especially when I have to discuss these matters with young, scientifically trained skeptics. They present their objections, their doubts about rebirth, about other realms of existence. Then I tell them, what would you say if I were to tell you that right now in this room there are voices which are speaking French, Spanish, Italian, Chinese. I'm not saying that you're chatting with each other, the Chinese people. Korean, Japanese, Portuguese, Swahili, Arabic, Hebrew. You think I'm crazy, right? You're hearing voices. But if you have your cell phone on and you have a number which can get calls coming from France, you'll get voices speaking in French. If you're getting calls, people who are speaking Spanish, you'll be able to hear Spanish. So the vibrations of all of those radio waves, are they radio waves? I'm not sure what kind of waves they are. Some kind of waves are coming through from all of these telephone calls, are just coming right through this room we don't have our telephone on to receive those telephone calls. If we had the telephone call on and we were expecting a call from that person, then we would be able to pick up voices speaking in those other languages. So all of the other realms, we could say they're all sort of interwoven and superimposed on one another. But with your cell phone, you only pick up the calls that are coming to you. And so with our particular rebirth consciousness, Bhavanga consciousness, we pick up events in the human world, or in this world which we share, the humans and animals which we share together. So this is our world because our consciousness is functioning at this level, our rebirth consciousness, our Bhavanga consciousness. Change the rebirth consciousness, then at rebirth, a different world might manifest. Okay, so let us continue. Now we're taking the survey of the 4 planes of existence. So he divides the planes into 4 planes. We have what is called the woeful plane. Well, so I usually translate this, the plane of misery. Then comes they call it here the sensuous, blissful plane, but I would call it the more fortunate rather than blissful, since even, this includes the human beings, but seldom are we really blissed out. But still, we are fortunate to be human beings. And these 2, 1 and 2, the woeful plane and the sensuous fortunate plane, constitute the sense sphere plane. So those are just 2 subdivisions within the sense sphere plane. Then comes the fine material sphere plane and the immaterial sphere plane. Okay, so those are the 4. And now he's going to go through and explain the different realms within these planes. Okay, so going down to the next section. So among these, the woeful plane, or the plane of misery, is 4-fold, namely hell, the animal kingdom, the sphere of the pretas, also known as hungry ghosts. This is the Chinese Ugwei. Was it my pronunciation all right? Okay. And the host of asuras, which is a little bit problematic, as we'll see. Okay, so the hells are the lowest plane of existence in the Buddhist cosmos, the realm of the most intense suffering. And many cultures have a conception of a hell. So it's not something unique to Christianity. Buddhist culture does too. But a difference is that in Buddhism, as well as I guess in Hinduism, there's no conception of an eternal, everlasting hell. And also in Buddhism, rebirth in hell is not considered a punishment that is imposed on one by an almighty God for committing sins, but rather rebirth in hell, as in any other realm, occurs as part of a natural process through the working of karma, that if one commits deeds, actions which are of a very heavy, unwholesome nature, very grave transgressions of fundamental moral principles, then one has to take rebirth in a realm that corresponds to the nature of those deeds. So this I call a kind, rather than using similes the way I did just a few minutes ago, this is what I would call a rational argument for the existence of other realms of existence and rebirth. It's not intended to be a logical proof, since I don't think you could prove this, but the way I've reasoned this to myself. We take people who have committed extremely evil deeds, take what in the 20th century what would be the people who committed the epitome of evil deeds, like Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, each of them responsible for the murder of millions of people. And then on the other hand, we take people who have performed extremely selfless, virtuous, altruistic, self-sacrificing deeds, like, say, Mother Teresa. Okay, there's two possibilities. One possibility is that death means the end of everything. When death occurs, the stream of consciousness is permanently cut off. There's no survival of the person beyond death. If that is the case, then it means that at death, on the one hand, Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, on the other hand, Mother Teresa, both have the same fate. For both, there's just sheer nothingness, absolute end of everything. So it means that, okay, maybe you could say for Hitler's last couple of weeks, he experienced misery and despair as he saw the Third Reich collapsing. But up to that time, he was like sitting on the top of the world, like proud of himself as being the world conqueror, having all of Europe under his command. Everything he wants to enjoy, he could enjoy. The same with Stalin. And Mother Teresa was living in a slum in Calcutta, living a life of self-sacrifice, utter simplicity, self-denial. And so they come to the end, and that's it. Everything is finished. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is that they are each creating karma, which will bring its appropriate results in the next life. And so we can't say that this is proof for the existence of survival of death, but if there's any kind of moral justice in the universe, there has to be something beyond death by which we experience the results that correspond to the actions we've performed in this life. If there isn't any survival of death, if there isn't any continuity of personal existence, really seems that the universe becomes absurd. Maybe, we could say maybe it is absurd. We don't know for sure. At least I don't know for sure. But I have some kind of trust that there is some principle of moral justice at work in the universe, some moral order such that goodness brings good, and evil brings what is undesirable or evil. Okay, so now we come to the hells. It is said that the beings in hell have to suffer the results of their evil deeds from the beginning of their lives until the end without a moment's respite. Then the commentaries, actually I think there might be a basis in the suttas for this. Don't quite remember. But they state that there are 8 great hells with different names here. The one that we know is most familiar from the suttas is the Avicii hell, which is said to be the lowest and most terrible. Then each great hell is surrounded on each of its 4 sides by 4 minor hells, bringing the total to 136 hells. So I remember when I first began to read about Buddhism, I was reading like some of the works of, we call the Buddhist apologists who are trying to defend Buddhism from against Christianity. And they were modernizing Buddhism and rationalizing it and saying in Buddhism, there's no eternal hell, no eternal heaven, as though that makes Buddhism superior to Christianity. But it took a little time for me to discover that even though there's no eternal hell, there are 136 temporary hells, much more than in Christianity. Does it say 5? Wait, my text, maybe there's been a change. Each great hell is mine reads, each great hell is surrounded on each of its 4 sides by 4 minor hells. 5. Let's see. That could have been. How could 4 sides have?
I was reading that.
Yeah. Let me just check it. Hold it off. Hold on for a minute. Henry is very quick in arithmetic. Okay, 8 has 4, that's 32. By 4. I get 128. Anyway, let's say that. I told you, let's not get hung up on numbers. But it's, oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so each one, there are 4 sides.
Yeah.
And each side there are 4.
Yeah.
Okay, so 4 times 4 equal to 16.
Yeah.
16 plus the 1. So it's 17. See, like
I got it. I have it now.
Okay.
No, I have it very simply. It has to be 100. It has to be
136, like in the middle, right?
It has to be 4 by 4 because
No.
we have 8 hells with 4 sides.
And the middle,
Yeah,
the middle.
yeah.
So
We have to take the central one. So
17.
8 by 4 is 32, and each of the 32 has 4, so that's 128.
And
But
plus
then we have to
8.
take the 8 major hells.
Yes,
So 128 plus
Yes.
8 is 136.
yes.
So the 5 should be corrected to 4.
All right?
Yeah. Okay, now we're good. Okay, thank you. Okay. So we're settled on the number of hells and the number, how it's obtained. Okay, then we come to the animal kingdom. I don't know how far down the animal kingdom extends. You know, of course, certainly things like birds, simple mammals, rodents would be beings that have been reborn. Probably, I would guess, fish, lizards. Whether insects are beings that are transmigrating, ants, termites, flies, I don't know. Even more simpler simpler creatures like amoeba. There was another one that we used to look at under the microscope, paramecium. Whether those are transmigrating beings, I don't know. But anyway, we could take it for granted that what we usually call animals are beings that are part of the process of transmigration. And so rebirth into the animal realm is considered an unfortunate rebirth, since most animals have to live constantly struggling to obtain food, fighting with each other over mates, living in constant fear of being attacked and devoured by other animals, stronger animals. And if we consider even the fate, this is really terrible what America does to the animals, all of the animals that are raised for food. We have million, I don't know numbers, but probably several billion cows every year, chickens, pigs, lambs, which are just slaughtered, as just they're young sheep. They're slaughtered to make lamb, young cows slaughtered to make veal. And they're not treated with any kind of respect or compassion, but just all compressed into these cages. They call them CAFO, feeding. Does anybody remember what CAFO stands for? They're like these cages in which they compress many, many animals and keep them there to feed them, just to bring them up, injecting them with hormones, feeding them. They don't even have enough space to lie down and sleep peacefully. And then when they reach the age of maturity, then they're just, well, let's say the age, not even of maturity, but just when they reach fullness of bodily growth, they're taking out for slaughter. Okay, but then there are some animals that, even though the animal realm is an unfortunate realm of existence, but some animals do have some good karma coming to manifestation. So these would be like dogs and cats that are given nice, friendly homes in which people take care of them and feed them regularly and take them out for exercise and treat them with love and respect. Okay, then we have the sphere of Petas. These are the beings that are, the word is often translated as hungry ghost, probably based on the Chinese Ugui. And so these are beings who are depicted as tormented by intense hunger and thirst, as well as other afflictions from which they cannot find relief. And it's said here that the Pretas have no world of their own, but rather they live in the same world as... I hope this is not going to deprive you of sleep tonight. They live in the same world as human beings in forests, bogs, and cemeteries, though they remain invisible to human beings except when they display themselves or if they're perceived by the divine eye. Okay, so when people claim that they see ghosts, even though I think a lot of people are just subject to wild imagination, but there could be cases where people actually do see ghosts. And so it could be that Petas are making themselves manifest to these people. And usually the Petas are depicted in Buddhist literature as having very big bellies and very thin necks and small mouths, so that when they get any kind of food, they could only eat a little bit, which never satisfies them. And whatever kind of food they find turns into feces or a mucus or garbage. Okay, then you see in the early Buddhist text, in the suttas, 5 realms of existence are spoken of. The devas, or the deities, human beings, the animal realm, the pretas, and the hell realms. But other texts mention a realm called the asuras. And so there comes a little problem of where to place them in relation to the 5 realms. And so when 6 realms are recognized, then the asuras are considered one of the unfortunate realms. And so in the Theravada tradition, it's said that the asuras are a group of tormented spirits similar to the pretas. But then suttas speak about a group of beings called the asuras, which are depicted as constantly fighting with the deities in the Tavatimsa Deva world, the heaven of the 33. And so the Theravada tradition says that there are 2 types of asuras. The type that is similar to the afflicted spirits, similar to the pretas, and the asuras that are existing in the heaven of the 33, fighting with the devas. But I think in like the other Buddha schools and in the Mahayana Buddhism, where they speak about 6 realms of existence, the asuras, which are the separate realm, are considered the beings that are fighting with the devas in the Tavatimsa world. Is that correct? In the Sarvastivada Abhidhamma? So they have 2 kinds of asuras also. I see. Okay. Okay, so these are the beings in the unfortunate realms of existence. And to what extent, even though I say definitely in my opinion there has to be a hell realm and there's probably a realm of pretas, but to what extent one has to take all 136 hells literally, as an exact number, that I put in question marks. It could be that just the imagination of the ancient Indian compilers of the texts, they sat down to think of all the different possible kinds of punishment that beings can undergo in the human realm. Then they interjected them down into the hells and then devised all of the variations on them, and so came up with a number of 136. So the number and all of the details I would put sort of in brackets with a question mark after it. But I certainly believe that there has to be realms of intense suffering in which beings undergo retribution for their strong, grave, unwholesome karma. Okay, now we come to the sensuous or sense sphere, blissful or fortunate plane. And so this is divided into seven realms. We have the human realm. I know some of you might be doubtful about the existence of the human realm, but particularly if we watch some of the evening news, sometimes we doubt the reality of the human realm. But at least on occasion we get some concrete evidence that there are human beings still on planet Earth. Then we come to above the human realm are the 6 sense sphere heavenly realms. There's the realm of the 4 great kings, which we'll come to in a moment in more detail. The realm of the 33 gods. This is the Tavatimsa Deva realm. the realm of the Yama gods. Then there is it's translated here, the delightful realm, but this is better to use the original word, the Tusita heaven. Then the realm of the gods who rejoice in their own creations, and the realm of the gods who lord over or control the creations of others. Okay, to take some of the realms that are less familiar with us. Okay, we have the realm of the four great kings. So this is the lowest of the heavenly realms. And this realm is divided into four. Each of these four divisions is presided over by a different king, a divine king, and inhabited by a different class of deities. So to the east, there's the divine king called Datarata, who rules over the Gandhabas or Gandharvas. The Gandharvas are depicted as celestial musicians, but sometimes they're also described as deities that inhabit fruit trees, flower trees, and so on. Then there is the divine king called Virulhaka, who presides over the Kumbhandas. These are kinds of gnome-like beings who live in forests and mountains and guard hidden treasures. In the western region, there is the divine king Virupaka, who rules over the Nagas. The Nagas are dragon-like spirits. And in the north, there is Vaisavana, who is the ruler of the Yakas. The Yakas are often depicted as fierce, demonic spirits. Okay, to be a good, sincere, practicing Buddhist, one doesn't have to subscribe to all of these realms and classes of beings as articles of faith. But it's just possible that these beings were a way in which early Buddhism incorporated the classes of beings that were recognized in the popular Indian imagination of that period. I don't want to sound completely like a skeptic necessarily that I'm denying their existence, but if one has some trouble, accepting this, don't think it's like a fixed article of faith, but we could see it as perhaps a product of the Indian imagination. What did you say? Okay, I take that back. Okay, then we come to the heaven of the 33, or the Tavatingsa heaven. This is the heaven that's mentioned most often in the suttas. There seems to be like regular interactions between the Buddha and the great disciples and the beings in the Tavatingsa Deva world. The ruler of the Tavatingsa Deva world is Sakka, or Shakra, who is a kind of Buddhist adaptation of the Vedic deity Indra. The word Indra means ruler, and so Sakka is called Devanam Inda, the ruler of the gods. And in the Buddha suttas, there are some suttas, or actually a number of suttas in which Sakka comes to visit the Buddha, to ask questions of the Buddha, and the Buddha discusses Dharma with Sakka, and then Sakka becomes a devotee of the Buddha. So in a way, we could see looking at this from the standpoint of modern literary criticism, we could see this as a way in which Buddhism tried to appropriate the old Vedic religion by making Indra, the chief deity of the Vedic religion, a devotee and follower of the Buddha. Okay, then there's the realm of the Yama gods, of which not very much is said in the Buddhist texts at all. They're just mentioned. But then comes the Tusita heavenly world, and that is said to be the abode of a bodhisattva in his last existence before he comes down into the human world to achieve Buddhahood. And it's said that a number of the followers, devout followers of the Buddha, were reborn in the Tusita world. For example, the Buddha's mother passed away 7 days after the Buddha was born. And then when she passed away, she was reborn in the Tusita heavenly world. And then Anathapindika, the Buddha's chief patron, when he passed away, he was reborn in the Tusita heaven. I think Visakha, the chief female patron, was reborn in the Tusita heaven. And it's said now that, at least in popular Buddhist belief, that Maitreya or Maitreya, the next Buddha to come in the world, is now dwelling in the Tusita heaven, awaiting what Buddha Gautama's teaching to disappear. And then when the conditions are right, he'll pass away from the Tusita heaven and come into the human realm and achieve enlightenment and become Maitreya Buddha. Okay, it said the gods in the Nimanarati heaven have the power to create objects of sensual enjoyment by thought in accordance with their desires. So I sometimes imagine that this is the heaven where people like Mozart, Bach, Handel, Haydn, the great musicians, the great poets, the great artists, because they delight in creation, right? So this seems to be the appropriate heaven for them to be reborn. And then comes the heaven of what's called the Paranimitta Vasavati heaven. This is the heaven of the gods who control the creations of others. I think this must be the heaven where editors, film directors, producers, publicists are reborn. But that's just speculation. Not very much is said really in the text about these two heavens. Okay, it's 10 o'clock. I think we take a little break and then we come back to, since I've left you at the heavenly worlds, I didn't want to introduce the break after we were in the midst of the realms of misery. Okay, so we'll take a 15-minute break and come back at 10:15.